Hi, it's Mark Hockman from PC World, and we're checking out not one, but two new Surface Laptop 3s at the Surface event in New York. So we're here at the Surface event, and normally we'd be talking about a single new Surface laptop, but this time around we have two. The Surface Laptop 3 13-inch, as well as a new 15-inch Surface Laptop 3. Normally we'd be talking about screen sizes, but here we're actually talking about processor changes. In the 13-inch, there is an Intel Ice Lake Core i7. But in this, there is a new special edition, a special Surface Edition AMD Ryzen 5. This is the first time not only we really have seen a Ryzen 5 in a laptop, but this is the first time we've seen a Surface Edition in a laptop as well. And this is what differentiates the two most strongly. But first, let's talk about sort of the basics. Now, historically, this has all been sort of Alcantara, right? That fabric that has been sort of coating the outside of these things. That's gone, or at least it's an option anyways. Now there's sort of that Surface Book feel to it all, brushed aluminum. It shines, it's smooth, it's cool, both literally and metaphorically. It's a nice addition to the hardware. We've also gotten rid of the rubber bumpers that used to be sort of on the back of the machine. That's gone too. We have a nice sort of sleek, slimline look to it. Again, sort of black. The black is still in vogue, although we've seen a couple of other colors as well. Physical changes to this, one thing they haven't gotten rid of is the Surface connector. That's a plus. It obviously holds legacy with the Surface dock. It also potentially means that at some point, cross your fingers, we might see a Surface dock that's updated instead of being remained fixed and static for the past couple of years. We now have USB-C. USB-C has been on the Surface Book 2 before, it's been on the Surface Go, but now it comes to the Surface Laptop. It's mainstream. It looks like we'll be able to use it for I/O, not necessarily for charging. We don't see any Thunderbolt capabilities either. This is really more of an expansion slot. You know, baby steps, right? So, but let's again look at what's different about the machines, and we get to the 13-inch and the 15-inch and the processor differences. According to the tests that we've done, and we've only had previews to date, Ice Lake is actually roughly about the same speed as Whiskey Lake, the previous generation. Ice Lake is 10th generation, Whiskey Lake is 8th gen. Depending upon which application you're running, the performance is comparable, slightly higher for Ice Lake. It really leans hard though on the GPU. Anything involving encoding, for example. We've looked at Handbrake. And when we get into handbrakes, this leans harder on the GPU. Ice Lake performance goes up by about, I think it was about 40%. Anything associated with graphics, again, you're going to have some real positive here. The Ryzen 5 still remains something of a mystery. We've had a Ryzen 3 laptop. This is this is mobile Ryzen. This is actually a Zen Plus architecture, not the Zen 2 architecture in the desktop. So it's going to be sort of a step behind in that regard. It does, however, have additional graphics horsepower that probably Ice Lake doesn't have. Again, the fact that this is a Surface Edition is sort of a black box. We saw Lisa Su, AMD CEO, wandering about here. We're hoping to get a little bit more of an answer later on. We don't have those answers right now. But what we would assume, given the fact that this is a 15-inch, and 15 inches are typically more powerful, is that Microsoft at least believes that this, in fact, is a processor that can keep up with Ice Lake, maybe even surpass it. Again, testing is going to be what we use to determine this. Microsoft tells us that this is going to have all-day charging, all-day battery life and quick charging. That's a nice feature that some of the other laptops here, including the Surface Pro X, has as well. We don't know exactly what battery life is going to be, but if all day, probably maybe at 12 hours or something like that sort. The keyboards look to be about the same as traditional Surface laptops, 1.3 millimeters of key travel, 19 millimeters of pitch. Again, if you look at them, they seem to be exactly the same. The trackpad has increased a little bit on the Surface Pro 7 and looks to be the same thing on the Surface Laptop 3 as well. That's a 20% increase. That may make a difference to you. There's still a large bit of screens or palm space for your palms. The trackpad is pretty much what you would expect to find on a Surface Book. It actually feels glassy, whereas the laptop has been a little bit more of a plasticky feel to it, so you might have some performance increase there. The question is, what should you buy versus the 13-inch or the 15-inch? We can't answer that question right now. We have some cursory guesses as to what you want to do, but hopefully we'll get this in the testing labs. We'll be able to make a determination a little bit later on. Pricing for these, $999, $1199, available in November. And that's it for the Surface Laptop 3. Continue watching PC World for more from the Surface launch here in New York City.